All right, man, peace. You know, brothers, oftentimes in life, when people know that they have something great in their life, but they don't want to acknowledge it to that person, that the person has added a lot to their life, it oftentimes will lead to unnecessary conflict. And the person who does not want to admit that they have a great thing in their life will try to utilize pride, oftentimes until it's too late. Then suddenly they'll try to humble themselves. But by then, the person who has brought so much light and such a gift into their life knows that the only reason why this other person is trying to humble themselves is because they're desperate, which means that the humility is insincere. And that's what we're seeing right now with Gregg Popovich and his last desperate attempt to see if he can break through Kawhi's defenses and find some type of weakness in Kawhi Leonard's psychology that he can use and manipulate. But right now, Kawhi Leonard is done with him. So anyway, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
All good. You know where we're starting, gentlemen. Let's get it. Gregg Popovich headed to Cali to meet with Kawhi Leonard yesterday, according to our Ramona Shelbourne and Adrian Wojnarowski. Popovich has been working for weeks to set up this meeting to discuss the issues that have fractured the franchise's relationship with Leonard and caused him to issue a public trade demand. Kawhi has made it clear he hopes to be in LA, preferably with the Lakers. Max Kellerman. Should the Spurs still be spending their time and energy trying to sway Kawhi to stay in San Antonio?
Before Max Kellerman answers, let me say this. The San Antonio Spurs should have given themselves a proper psychological evaluation of Kawhi Leonard, because had they done so, and had they not tried to treat him like he was every other person that has come through their organization, they would not have taken the tact that they took initially, and they would not therefore be trying to compensate for that erroneous strategy by trying to kiss his ass now. Kawhi Leonard is one of those guys, as I've already stated in another video, that once he's done, he is done. They're wasting their time. And I truly don't see him coming back from his decision to not want to play for their organization anymore. Unless Gregg Popovich and Tony Parker get on TV and say, Kawhi Leonard, we're so sorry. We're going to give you our salaries for next season if you come back and play with us. We apologize for embarrassing you in the mainstream media. Please, we'll do anything. I think that anything short of that, Kawhi Leonard's going to say thanks, but no thanks.
Of course they should. You have to do your due diligence. Popovich is the guy in that. He's the franchise, really. And he's not sending anyone else. He is going to sit down with his best player, who, by the way, when healthy, I believe, is the second best player in basketball, even better than the great Kevin Durant.
I think that Kawhi, if fully healthy, is somewhere around third or fourth between him and Steph Curry. And to be quite frank with you, I've stated this numerous times, anywhere from 2 to 5, you could have any type of order, because there are those who might put Anthony Davis at number 2. Max Kellerman oftentimes puts Anthony Davis at number 2. So maybe it's a Freudian slip that he has Kevin Durant, or maybe he's not quite as sure of what his overall hierarchy should be after LeBron, just as I'm not, because it can shift in regards to what the hierarchy of greatness in the NBA is. But it's unfortunate that Gregg Popovich has gone through all these machinations only to figure out that in order to show respect for his players, especially great players, you have to be transparent. Not trying to go through the media with cryptic statements that are being used to diminish your player's masculinity or to show that he's not willing to do what it takes to come back to the team. Those are not going to be ways to ingratiate yourself in today's NBA, Gregg Popovich. Everybody's not going to be a robot for you. Everybody's not going to be a military brat, proverbially speaking, like a David Robinson for you, or a docile golem like Tim Duncan. Some people actually have their own brain.
Kawhi Leonard, by the way, people like Michael Jordan look at him. And by the way, not just Jordan, others look at Kawhi and go, that's a level of competitiveness that reminds us of Michael Jordan. He's quiet, he's soft-spoken, his demeanor is kind of under the radar, but, in spite of what his uncle or anyone else around him want for him, he's that kind of guy, but he is intensely competitive. And other than LeBron James, the best player in basketball. You must do your due diligence. It reminds me, Stephen A., of a team, they're down 8 points, there are 43 seconds left. Well, they're very, very likely to lose that game. It's highly unlikely to win that game. But does that mean you don't foul, put them on the line, and then take threes? Of course not. Is it desperate? Is it unlikely to work? Yes. but you must try because it's not like the odds are zero. You must do your due diligence.
You know, brothers, there's a saying that desperate times demand desperate measures, but oftentimes we create desperate times by making the wrong decisions early on. I always harp on this channel. Self-awareness is a strong key to manhood. If you're not aware where you are within a relationship dynamic, no matter what it is, whether it's with your woman, with your children, with your parents, with your colleagues at work, or what have you, it's going to lead you to making bad decisions. Gregg Popovich was under the strange misconception that he could do with Kawhi Leonard whatever he wanted mentally. He thought that Kawhi, due to his being quiet and docile, was weak mentally. And I think that's what frustrated him, as I've touched on in other videos, that Kawhi did not make his brain open for puppeting as so many other of the star San Antonio players have done for Gregg in the past.
You must put every effort forth to keep the best player in the game outside of LeBron James on your team. And not only is he that, but he's also been inculcated with the Spurs culture. You think of, until very recently, with the injury, and you can trace it back to his uncle taking over his career. As I've mentioned, it's called show business, not family business. But
well, that's you basically trying to imply that his uncle is leading him the wrong way or leading him astray, which is once again an indirect way of you stating that the San Antonio Spurs are in the right. That seems to be off-brand for you, Max Kellerman, being a liberal Caucasian, that you would speak in terms of the corporation being correct as opposed to the employee. That's going against your Marxist programming, Max Kellerman. Or maybe it's just revealing how you actually really think.
But whatever you want to trace it to, until that moment, Kawhi seemed like the perfect successor to Tim Duncan, who seemed like the perfect successor to David Robinson. Kawhi is the soft-spoken, intensely competitive, all-time great superstar who doesn't make all the highlight reels. He just helps you win championships. They must do everything in their power, even if they believe it's a lost cause, to do their due diligence to see if there's a way they can salvage the relationship and keep him on the team.
If they had done their due diligence in regards to who Kawhi Leonard was as a player, they would never have reached this crossroads with him in the first place. They were unable to respect him when he told them what the issue was. Now that he's seen the level of disrespect that they will use as an alternative to actually communicating with him, he's lost all respect for them, Max Kellerman. It's over. It's over.
I think the Spurs are wasting their time here, Max. I disagree with you. I understand where you're coming from, and on its face, obviously, you take that approach. But from what my sources tell me, Kawhi Leonard met with Gregg Popovich face-to-face, looked him dead in his face, and told him, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be in San Antonio any longer.
And Stephen A. Smith, I'm sure that you're telling the truth, brother. Because just looking at who Kawhi Leonard comes off to me as, in regards to his personality type, that's something that he would do once he's done and look you dead in your face and say, I didn't ask you to come here. You decided to come here to embarrass yourself. You had the chance to treat me like a man all throughout the season, when I told you that my leg was still hurting. Instead of you respecting me as a man, you decided you were going to send your lapdogs after me. So now, the bridge is burned. It is what it is. Have a nice flight back.
And by all accounts, everywhere that I've searched, he is absolutely positively going to become a member of the Los Angeles Lakers. You know what? Let me take that back. I should tell you LA. He wants to be in LA. The likelihood is that it is the Lakers, but Kawhi Leonard wants to be in LA, and he is going to be in LA either this year or next, either this season or after this season come next summer. He is going to be in LA. There is no way around that. So he's put San Antonio and the basketball world on notice. He wants out. He no longer wants to be a member of the organization. He was letting them know now, not to just give them a year in advance heads up, but to give them the opportunity before the draft and during this summer to move him so he doesn't have to spend the next season in San Antonio. That's basically what he's done. So if you are the San Antonio Spurs and you have a superstar universally recognized as one of the top 3 or 4 players in the world, and he has made it very, very clear to you that he doesn't want to be there. Tim Duncan can't convince him otherwise. David Robinson can't convince him otherwise. Manu Ginobili can't convince him otherwise. Tony Parker can't convince him otherwise. Gregg Popovich can't convince him otherwise.
The reason why none of those guys can convince him is because he knows that all those players are tentacles for Popovich. So if Popovich can't convince him and he has no respect for Popovich, why would he have any respect for any of those players?
Then to me, you need to be about the business of doing everything that you can to get the best offer imaginable so you can find him with another team and get as many assets as you want, and you do so before the draft. Rather than spend your time preoccupied with sort of assuaging his feelings or trying to modify them to some degree, recognize the hopeless situation that it is. He does not want to be there. You do have his rights. You do have him under contract for another year, so you don't have to capitulate. That is true. But in terms of trying to massage the situation, it's done. He doesn't want to be there. He wants to be in LA, and that is that.
Question. Do you feel, not rhetorical, a genuine question, Stephen A.,
Sure.
do you feel that any of this is the uncle's influence? In other words, is this coming 100% from Kawhi, or is it coming from an external influence? Because if it is, then maybe there's a sense that inside Kawhi really is conflicted about it.
Now, pay very close attention to the question that Max Kellerman asked Stephen A. Smith. As I noted earlier in this segment, Max Kellerman is coming against the uncle, and he's trying to pinpoint the uncle for the reason why Kawhi is quote-unquote doing what he's doing. All the uncle is doing is his job, which is acting as a proverbial proxy, an intermediary between Kawhi and whatever team he's currently on, and also the team that he wants to go to inform Kawhi, this is what I think you should do. You listen to Kawhi Leonard as well. You have to take in what Kawhi states about his perceptions about his current organization. Max Kellerman is trying to make Kawhi Leonard's uncle/manager out to be some type of manipulative Svengali. Why is that? Because as we know, the San Antonio Spurs and Gregg Popovich are viewed as a liberal/woke organization. Max Kellerman is a Caucasian Jewish liberal. So, of course, he likes the energy that emanates from the San Antonio Spurs. And I tell you, brothers, this all the time. Whenever you reject any of the ideologies or the premises of liberal Caucasian Jews or liberal Caucasians in general, they attempt to assert that there's something wrong with you mentally or intellectually. You can't possibly be right in your head if you're coming against what I'm telling you, because I know what's best. I've stated a very long time ago that people like Max Kellerman, they believe in the ideology known as the quote-unquote white man's burden, that it is their job to enlighten you, to elucidate you, to inform you on how you should think in every matter.
Well, Max, here's the problem. The uncle clearly has something to do with it because he changed the game, because before...
It's his job to have something to do with it. The question is, was Kawhi Leonard thinking about staying with the San Antonio Spurs, and suddenly he's demanded a trade because of the uncle's influence? That is what Max Kellerman is asking you.
For him, they were dealing with the conventional agents out there doing business in a conventional way. The uncle is perceived as being a bit unorthodox. He's changed it in terms of what the culture was at San Antonio. The superstars like a David Robinson, and then obviously a Tim Duncan, followed by the Manu Ginobilis and Tony Parkers of the world. There was a certain way that the Spurs were allowed to conduct business as usual with them, and he sort of disrupted that apple cart.
Let me say this also. I have to give credit to Chris Broussard, who made this statement on one of those shows on Fox Sports, when I believe it was Speak for Yourself, when he stated that when you notice, all of the San Antonio Spurs' most prominent players are all foreign. And I think that that's purposeful, that they've gone out of their way to try to draft talent from overseas. Because those people raise their sons differently. They raise their sons to be obedient to authority, much more than as we see it here in America. And the one American-born player who was a star for the San Antonio Spurs in the relatively modern era was David Robinson, who came out of the military. So everyone who's rose into prominence or preeminence with the San Antonio Spurs have been trained to always be yes men. Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge are the first two players of prominence in the recent history of the San Antonio Spurs who have attempted to buck the system. Now, Popovich was able to assuage some of the concerns of LaMarcus Aldridge. Of course, many of his techniques have not worked on Kawhi. But Chris Broussard also brought up the point that Pop had issues with Steve Smith and Steven Jackson in the early 2000s. It's just that back then, those players did not have the cachet that a Kawhi Leonard currently has. So there is some precedent for players bucking up against Kawhi, but a lot of it's based on where they're from and how they're raised. And also, of course, how much proverbial clout they have.
So you could put it on the uncle. The problem is that when I come to you and I tell you that Kawhi Leonard purportedly looked Gregg Popovich in the face and told him he wants out, where do you go from there? You don't go anywhere from there but trying to get him up out of there because he doesn't want to stay.
Well, listen, Kobe Bryant, I've mentioned this when this topic comes up from time to time. Kobe Bryant, at a certain point, wanted out of L.A. He met with Dr. Jerry.
3 different times he wanted out of L.A., Max Kellerman. 3 different times. Even though Kobe Bryant's cult of personalities, his cult of worshipers, will try to tell you that he stuck it out with the L.A. Lakers. At the end of the 2000 season, he wanted out. At the end of the 04 season, he wanted out. And at the end of the 07 season, he wanted out.
Jerry Buss, the late, great Dr. Right. Jerry Buss, the greatest owner by far in the history of American team sports. And he told Dr. Buss to his face, I want out. And Dr. Buss told Kobe to his face, Kobe, you are a 5-carat diamond. If I have a 5-carat diamond, I'm not trading him for 5 1-carat diamonds. That's what the Cavs just did with Kyrie Irving. Maybe he was a 4.5-carat diamond. But the point is, I can't get equal value for you. You show me the player that's worth you, and I'll trade you for that. Because let's not forget, in the history of the NBA, Stephen A., it's just the history of the league, the winner of the trade is almost always the team that gets the best player in the deal. Clearly, that's going to be Kawhi Leonard in any deal.
Max, let me remind you that when Shaquille O'Neal gave his Hall of Fame speech, he cracked a joke on me, and he was talking about he appreciated Steve Kerr, what have you. He said because every other time he had been traded, he heard it from loud-ass Stephen A. Smith. Those were his words during his Hall of Fame speech. I went to Shaquille O'Neal back before he was traded, and I said, you up out of here. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, you're gone. I said, Dr. Buss is about to trade you. He couldn't believe it. He didn't want to hear it. He didn't believe it for 1 second, and then ultimately, a few days later, he found out that it was going down because Dr. Buss had told Kobe what you said, Max. Here's the thing. Kobe wanted out because Kobe wanted his own team.
Well, it's not to cut off Stephen A. Smith, but he's conflating 2 different times where Kobe Bryant was going to try to leave the Lakers. When Shaq was traded, that was at the end of the 04 season. What Max Kellerman is referring to, which was when Kobe Bryant went to Dr. Buss and demanded a trade, was after the 07 season. But let's let Stephen A. Smith continue what he's saying about Shaq and the exact parameters through which Shaquille O'Neal was eventually traded, because it's going to shine some light on what I've been stating, which is that Kobe Bryant is the reason why Shaq got traded. And many of Kobe Bryant's fans come on my channel and they try to argue that, and they say, no, Kobe had nothing to do with Shaq being traded, all this bullshit. They say, well, Dr. Buss was going to trade Shaq because he was old. No, there was a correlation there. Let me rewind it back just so that we can get Stephen A. Smith's testimony in proper context.
He didn't believe it for 1 second, and then ultimately, a few days later, he found out that it was going down because Dr. Buss had told Kobe what you said, Max. Here's the thing. Kobe wanted out because Kobe wanted his own team. Kobe didn't want to leave L.A. Kobe didn't want to be away from the Lakers. He wanted to be away from Shaq. And he wanted a team that was his own because he was not trying to be somebody's little brother.
In other words, he wanted Shaq out. So what Kobe Bryant was stating was that either you're going to trade Shaq or I'm going to leave. So he put the onus on Dr. Jerry Buss to trade Shaq.
When Buss made it clear to him, I'm going to pick you over Shaq because I'm not trying to give Shaq $100 million. I'm just not going out like that. Obviously, Shaq had to go, and Kobe was able to stay, and the rest is history. In the case of the San Antonio Spurs, it's important to recognize that it's not about Kawhi Leonard having a problem with the organization. Yeah, he thinks San Antonio mishandled stuff, but he could get over that. The issue is he genuinely wants to be in LA.
No, sir. And we've already gone over that in a couple of the other Kawhi Leonard videos that I did. Stephen A. Smith is trying to poo-poo the importance of Kawhi Leonard feeling betrayed both by Gregg Popovich and the San Antonio Spurs medical staff. And I think that he's making a gross error when he tries to create some type of a storyline or narrative outside of what actually happened.
Where he's from, that's his home.
Yeah, this is a
he
point.
Wants
We're
to
about
go
to get
home.
Yeah, guys,
that's the difference.
We're about to get into that. We're about to get into that point. There are various reasons why a guy wants out, etc. I will just remind you that Kobe Bryant wound up staying with the Lakers. So even though it is unlikely that they keep Kawhi Leonard, boy, they better do their best to try.
Okay, so we understand.
It was much easier to keep Kobe, though, particularly since you're the Los Angeles Lakers franchise, and you pretty much assured him that you were going to get him the help that he was so desperate for. There's a big difference between the Kobe Bryant situation and the Kawhi Leonard situation. Kawhi does not want to leave because he doesn't have enough help on his team. He wants to leave because he's against the culture. Kobe Bryant never had an issue with the owner or the culture of the franchise. He had an issue because he believed he did not have enough troops to help him win a championship.
I just gave you the breakdown of LA, though.
Yeah,
Well, go ahead, Mom.
where Kawhi's intention is, but I want to focus in on Pop now, guys. The fact that he flew out to San Diego to meet with Kawhi, we know how hard it was to set up this meeting. What does this say about Pop, Stephen A?
It says that his ass is desperate. It says that he knows that none of his mental manipulations, his attempts at psychological machinations, he sees that the jig is up on all that bullshit. It's not going to work anymore. He's going to have to be far more transparent and speak to Kawhi, really not even as an equal, but as a superior, to try to figure out where exactly he went wrong. I guarantee you that is the tone that Popovich had when he met with Kawhi Leonard and his team. He was like, Kawhi, where did I go wrong? Can you just talk to me? You've never talked to me in the 6 years you were with us. Can you talk to me now at least? And Kawhi is like, no, Pop, it's over. Trade me. Bye.
Well, what it says is that the great Gregg Popovich is going to have to adjust to some degree. And I shouldn't say just him. I'm just talking about the San Antonio Spurs, the way they do business. Obviously, Gregg Popovich is at the helm because even though R.C. Buford's the general manager, we all know that Popovich is the man in charge. He's the man in control of basketball operations. Gregg Popovich is either going to have to modify himself to such a degree in terms of dealing with the modern day era of players, or he's going to need to retire. Now, I'm not...
Well, according to reports, he's going to retire after the 2020 season. So I think that basically is his answer. And it's amazing that people are now asserting that Gregg Popovich is going to have to change his style of coaching, particularly since supposedly he represents what the apex is of coaching. And allegedly, according to his political ideologies, he's so liberal and so woke.
I'm not casting any aspersions on Gregg Popovich. I have told y'all affectionately, I say this complimentary. I think that he's a big phony because he's actually one of the nicest human beings that you ever encounter, class personified.
How would you know that, Stephen A. Smith? Have you lived with him? You're going by what? The couple of 5-minute interviews you've had with the man? Some press conferences? Did he offer you a glass of wine and all of a sudden you're smitten? It's amazing to me how little so many of these media members need in regards to substance in an attempt to say who's a nice person or who's not a nice person or who's a good person or who's not a good person. It takes a very long time to know whether someone is quote-unquote good or not.
Just a phenomenal person, a phenomenal coach, a phenomenal leader who's revered by most players, if not all of them. Everybody respects the hell out of Gregg Popovich. This is no...
Does everybody really, quote-unquote, revere Gregg Popovich? Or is it just a matter of not wanting to rock the boat? I know for a fact that all of Phil Jackson's former players don't revere him. Scottie Pippen, B.J. Armstrong, Horace Grant, they'll all give you a word in regards to how they feel like Phil Jackson used to try to dig them around and utilize a lot of psychological tricks similar to Gregg Popovich.
This is no casting of aspersions on him. What I am saying is Kawhi Leonard is emblematic of a new age and a new era of players that Gregg Popovich may not have had to deal with before. Kawhi Leonard is not Tim Duncan. Kawhi Leonard is not David Robinson. He's not Manu Ginobili and those guys. He's not going to give the hometown discount. He's not going to accept less than the max from San Antonio and all of this other stuff.
Nor should he.
And even then, again, you don't have the conventional agent and representative representing him. It's a different age. It's a different day where the players have more control over their destiny than they've ever had before.
It's going to be very interesting to see how the NBA tries to controvert a lot of this newfound player empowerment in the next collective bargaining agreement, because they certainly will try it. These owners are not going to go down without a fight. This trend of players trying to dictate what team they want to go to when their contract is not expired yet, they are going to try to address it in the next collective bargaining agreement.
Which is what had the owners petrified, which is why so many of them resented LeBron James so much when he decided to leave Cleveland to go to South Beach, because they knew it was indicative of a new age and a new era that was creeping up upon them, that was going to strip them of the level of control that they once had. They didn't like it. They blamed LeBron for it. To this day, some of them still blame him for it.
Once again, that is LeBron James's greatest contribution to the NBA, is the sense of player empowerment that he brought to the league. The understanding that you have to do what's best for you and your family at all times. You do not owe any loyalty to a franchise or to a city. You move where it is expedient for yourself and for your family. Always.
And that's what LeBron is dealing with. And we give him props for that. It is not.
And he deserves props for that.
It's not an insult. We applaud LeBron James for that. But that's the reality of the situation. And so now, if you're Gregg Popovich, you're a 5-time champion. You went to the playoffs like 19, 20 consecutive years. You know, your legacy is firmly established. Not that he gives a damn about that, but you're firmly entrenched as one of the great, great coaches and leaders in the history of this game. You're a treasure to this game. You're about to coach the Olympics in 2020. You've done all of these things. So the point now, Max, is this. Now that all of that's been done, all of that's been chronicled, all of that's been accomplished, do you really have the patience and the wherewithal to deal with what he has to deal with? Do you really want to do that? I don't know the answer to that question. Only Gregg Popovich knows that. But the way that they customarily did business, Kawhi Leonard has put on display that time is of the past. A new era has arrived.
Yes, and who do they have to blame for that, Stephen A. Smith? That's the real question. Unless you're going to contend that Kawhi Leonard's injury was not legitimate the whole time. But I don't think that the brother is anywhere near that Machiavellian to fake an injury as a pretext to demand a trade. That just does not make enough sense, sir. I'm not buying that. This is the same person who dealt with a myriad of ankle injuries before he was finally taken out by Zaza Pachulia. So I'm not buying the whole Kawhi Leonard is not willing to risk it all for his team angle. I believe that he felt betrayed by how Popovich and many of his soon-to-be former teammates turned against him through the media. I believe that he felt betrayed by how he was cornered like an animal in the locker room and interrogated by his teammates, who are supposedly his brothers, on what's the quote-unquote real reason why he's not playing. As if he was, once again, faking the injury, or they were implying that he was not tough enough or sincere enough or honest enough. When people are treating you like that, that's really their way of telling you that they have no respect for you. And Kawhi picked up on that.
As it pertains to these players, we're more empowered than ever before, and we're not going to go along just to get along like guys used to do. That's what's going on here.
The players are more empowered than ever before. Maybe that's changed the dynamic. But you said a lot there. I'm going to take a couple points, and I gotta make my own here. First, the more I hear that Popovich, things have changed, and therefore Popovich needs to adapt, or Belichick needs to adapt, the more I think it's untrue. Popovich and Belichick are similar to each other in my view. Although Popovich can do his thing, it's similar and it's charming, and Belichick...
That's very true. People have made analogies or correlations between the San Antonio Spurs and the New England Patriots for the last 10 years or so now. And it's very interesting that both of these coaches seem to have alienated their best players at the same time, which also seems to be precipitating their downfall from their respective leagues at the same time. But we'll find out.
It can be off-putting. but they're both the best at what they do. They're the best coach slash GMs in their...
And also, isn't it interesting that both Gregg Popovich and Bill Belichick have military backgrounds?
respective sports in their leagues. And both of them have a no-nonsense kind of attitude. We've seen Popovich chew out Tim Duncan, the greatest power forward in the history of basketball, chew him out when he got back to the bench. And clearly, part of that is to send a message to the rest of the players, I'm chewing out Tim Duncan. And Duncan understood what was going on, and he accepted his role on the team as the leader of the team. And didn't fight Popovich on that. Understood he's a player like everyone else, but he's also a leader. And when the coach can do that to the leader, everyone else falls in line. He'll do that to me. And look at the example Duncan's setting. Do you think back then it was the players weren't considered the modern athlete with different attitudes? Yes, things changed post LeBron to Miami. Though like half of Duncan's career almost was after the decision in Miami, a good chunk of it at least. But even then, you think lots of Tim Duncans were lying around? I don't just mean in terms of his talent and his excellence and his competitiveness. I mean in terms of that attitude.
I agree. Psychological profile is very important, which to me makes it all the more glaring that the San Antonio Spurs so thoroughly misdiagnosed Kawhi Leonard's mental mind frame and exactly how they should go about interacting with him.
Toward the coach and toward the team. Same thing with Tom Brady in the NFL. You think a bunch of Tom Brady's just laying around? No, you have to find the right guy. But the GM/coach Popovich or Belichick and the...
Well, what Tom Brady and Kawhi Leonard both have in common is that seemingly they'll go through a wall for you as long as they know that you're being transparent in how you're treating them. Once Tom Brady saw that Bill Belichick was ready to hamstring his own team by not playing what seems to be his best defensive back, even though many people have contended that Malcolm Butler had very poor defensive ratings throughout the playoffs, he was pretty much recognized as their best defensive back. The fact that he was not played in the Super Bowl and there was no explanation given to the New England Patriots has made Tom Brady kind of divest himself of any sense of urgency in making sure that he complies with Bill Belichick. In the same way, Kawhi Leonard, who at one time seemed to be ready to go through walls for Gregg Popovich, in light of how he was treated in the aftermath of his injury and how it was covered and an attempt was made to manipulate the situation through the media, Kawhi Leonard has said to himself, you know what, I'm not fucking with this guy anymore.
And the NFL finds the right guy. And he thought Kawhi was the right guy, obviously. I don't think things have changed that much that Popovich or Belichick, by the way, need to change the way they do business. And the way...
Well, I'll tell you this, Max Kellerman, what both those coaches understand is that their fate is tied to their best player. And if their best player no longer wants to play for them or comply with them, the clock is ticking on the remainder of their careers as coaches. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to find a Kawhi Leonard or a Tom Brady falling out of a tree. And Tom Brady understood that, which is why he was able to, in tandem with the owner of the New England Patriots, Bob Kraft, hamstring Belichick by making him get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, which put Belichick in the situation where now he pretty much has to kowtow to Tom Brady.
The way they do business, incidentally, is the most successful of their era. In Belichick's case of all time, in Popovich's case of his era in the NBA. Why should they change what they do when what they do is the most successful thing done? Yep.
Because you can't be robotic and mechanical in your approach. And I'm not accusing Gregg Popovich of doing that. I'm just speaking generically. I'm not talking about Popovich, right. Max. Well, I'm simply saying that, hold on, Max. I'm answering your question. The point that I'm trying to make is that when you are a guy, you might have had success over the course of 22 years, but it's a different age and it's a different era. You know, the way folks dealt with kids back in the day is different than how they deal with them now. The same thing with adults, the same thing with corporate America, the same thing with athletes. It's just a different time, a different age, and when you're dealing with somebody different, sometimes it calls for you to be a bit different, to modify your game in such a degree to adapt to the times.
But Popovich has shown that he adapts where necessary. For example...
Well, Popovich has shown that he adapts to win games. Has he shown that he's willing to adapt in the way that he interacts with his players? That's what Stephen A. Smith is talking about, Max Kellerman.
For example, Dan
How do you know that,
brand of basketball D'Antoni's brand of basketball on the court, shooting a lot of threes. Popovich is on the record saying he doesn't like it, but he recognized the league was changing that way.
No, but I'm talking about personnel. I'm talking about personnel.
Those ideas, and he did.
I'm talking about personnel.
But that shows. I understand, but that shows a willingness, whether it's X's and O's on the court or personality off the court.
No, it does not show personality off the court. You have to establish a precedent to prove your point, Mr. Max Kellerman. You can't just make a correlation like that. People are willing to do what will allow them to win. That's totally different from how they interact with regular people. That's what Stephen A. Smith is talking about.
It shows a willingness to adapt where necessary. In my view, it does. Let me say this about Popovich. I think, what does it say about Pop? I think, back to your point from our first debate today, I think it says more about Kawhi. I think Kawhi Leonard wants to be in Los Angeles, wants to be a Laker, and so he's rationalizing everything in terms of the way they handled his injury. In life, it's called separation anxiety. You're about apart from someone.
Here we go, more psychobabble. Please understand that the psychology field came from the Caucasian Jew in Germany in the mid-1800s.
Someone you guys don't really want to be apart, and so you pick a fight with each other because it makes it easier to be apart. I think that's what Kawhi is doing. He wants to be on the Lakers. It's the greatest franchise in the history of basketball in the known universe, the Los Angeles Lakers. It's in maybe the greatest place to play and live in the world. Why wouldn't he want that when he's from the area?
Look, again, we already know that Kawhi Leonard wants to play with the Lakers. But the onus that he's placed on being traded there never started until he was demonized by his own team. And for people to try to act like that never happened is rather disingenuous, and it's a pathetic attempt to control the narrative in favor of the San Antonio Spurs.
So how does Kawhi get himself out of that? He got to get mad at Pop.
Well, Max, I don't care about that because I want to get back to what you said earlier, which is far more important than you reminding everybody that he loves L.A. Here's the deal. You talked about adapting. You talked about, well, you know what? It's about Kawhi, or who says that Gregg Popovich hasn't adapted as it pertains to a style of play. When I'm talking about the individuals, here's what I mean. Would Gregg Popovich have been able to get away with being Gregg Popovich if he didn't have Tim Duncan buying in all the way? Tim Duncan bought in. David Robinson bought in. Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker, as a result of Tim Duncan, bought in. If you don't have your star, Jeff Van Gundy has said this on many occasions, if you are a coach and you don't have your star buying in to what you're selling to the team and the organization as a whole and what's disseminated to the masses, you lost. You're going to fall. And in this case, Popovich does not have Kawhi Leonard buying in. Now, the reasons could be the uncle, could be Kawhi, I don't know. But he clearly does not have Kawhi buying in
but I don't
the
think
way that Tim Duncan bought in.
Max, last word here, and then we got to move on.
I know it's right.
I think that's right, Stephen A. The question is, why isn't he buying into your point in our first debate?
Well, Max Kellerman, if the point is why didn't he buy in, then how could you state that it does not matter whether or not Gregg Popovich amends his methods of interacting with personnel? It's very clear that your narrative is not holding up under scrutiny, sir.
I don't think it's something endemic or inherent in Kawhi's personality, which is the main obstacle, I think. I think it's simply he wants to be in L.A. And I think
You see that, Stephen A. Smith? Stephen A. Smith is finally starting to pick up on what Max Kellerman has been alluding to for the longest time, which is that it's possible that there's just something wrong upstairs with Kawhi, that he does not see the greatness of Gregg Popovich, the woke liberal Caucasian, and how he's blessing him with his aura and his presence.
Popovich,
My bad.
I think Popovich needs to figure
right,
out. Is it really about that? Because if it is, fine. But Kawhi showed himself to be the model Spur until now.
Guys.
We got it, Max. We're not listening to Max Kellerman right there, Molly. Okay. We're listening to Papa Kellerman, the
Thank you, sir.
philosopher. That's what we just heard.
Gentlemen,
you're giving us the formulation.
We're done with
I
this.
got it.
We're
My
done
bad.
with this topic.
My
we
bad.
understand Pop
Right.
exhausting all options as he should to keep Kawhi, who has another year left
Talk about
on
Papa
his
Kellerman.
contract.
Papa Kellerman, talk about Pop.
I got breaking news for you,
That's what we
gentlemen.
But anyway, that's pretty much the end of that situation. It's good that Stephen A. Smith finally figured out what Max Kellerman was doing after 20 minutes of back and forth, all he was basically doing was regurgitating what his father told him. As I tell you brothers all the time, Max Kellerman is incapable of understanding what he's observing on his own. He has to find some type of statistician company or his father to tell him exactly what he's looking at, because he's basically a robot. It is what it is. In regards to Kawhi Leonard, hopefully everything will turn out well for the brother. So peace.